I've lived in the small town Lake Bluff, Illinois, all my 46 years. Lake Bluff feels a lot like Mayberry and has about 6,000 residents. Nestled between Chicago and Milwaukee, Lake Bluff is perched atop 60-foot bluffs overlooking the beauty of Lake Michigan. The streets are lined with oaks and maples, with countless ravines scattered throughout the town, all leading to the lake, making it an ideal place to play and enjoy the beauty of nature. The surprising thing is, despite all of Lake Bluff's wonders, she's one of Chicagoland's best-kept secrets. Many people in Chicago don't even know where Lake Bluff is. I recently ran into a grade school friend who reminded me that in the 1970s, Lake Bluff wasn't even listed on local maps we use for school assignments. Our neighboring community to the south, Lake Forest, was listed, but then it skipped right over us to Waukegan. The closest clue on any map that we even existed was a small red dot with tiny red print you could barely read saying, Lake Bluff Children's Home. There are only a few things I can think of that have put Lake Bluff on the map during our town's 116-year history. The first was in 1917, when the Chicago Tribune once declared Lake Bluff as the most patriotic town in America. This came after our small village sent more men to serve in the First World War than any other town its size. That same year, we also raised money to send an ambulance and a driver to France to support the war effort. Leftover money from the ambulance drive was used to erect a war memorial in the village green, where it still stands today. The second thing that put Lake Bluff on the map happened in 1951. That year, General Douglas MacArthur, who had been dismissed from his Korean command by President Harry S. Truman, was on his way to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when his motorcade was diverted by our town's local women's club as it headed north on Sheridan Road. The Lake Bluff townfolk all gathered and lined the streets to welcome the great war hero as his motorcade drove through town. The procession was halted, and when MacArthur got out of his car, he was asked to place a wreath in front of the war memorial, which the great general said he was honored to do. The final thing that put our town on the map, and what Lake Bluff is best known for today, is our 4th of July parade. Started in 1911, it has grown to become an event attracting as many as 20,000 people to our village streets each and every year. While growing up in Lake Bluff in the 1960s and 70s, I spent a lot of time playing at the local parks, on our beach bluffs, and in the ravine trails throughout our little village. Another place I played at was just 4 doors down from my childhood home. It's the place that was mentioned on the map in the small red print, the Lake Bluff Children's Home. It occupied an entire town block and had a great playground with all sorts of equipment we would spend hours on, the kind of unsafe equipment that would never be permitted in a playground today. Besides swings, teeter-totters, and merry-go-rounds, most of the equipment was constructed of concrete climbing structures and in shapes of animal figures, like the sandbox turtle and the playground dolphin. The playground served as a common place to gather for the kids who lived on the streets of North Avenue and Scranton, and was bordered by an 8-foot hedge which served as a natural wall. Beyond the playground that clearly appealed to kids were the campus hallmark, 7 Georgian brick buildings. While I was growing up, all the buildings were abandoned, all but one, which was occupied by a group of teenage boys. My brother developed a friendship with one of the boys who lived at the children's home, whose name was Tony. I fondly remember going to the basement rec room of that building on Sunday nights to play ping pong, pool, and watch the $6 Million Man. While spinning on the merry-go-round, I remembered the simplest question coming across my mind. What is this place, and why do we call it the children's home? Because quite frankly, except for the 16 kids that lived in Tony's building, there were no children.
Buddy, you got troubles and you're about to have more. You got some serious looking people knocking on your door. Saw your chance and you made your play. Now the bill is coming due on the deal you made. Down at the crossroads, down at the crossroads, down at the crossroads, down at the crossroads. Shadows seem to know what you need. All you gotta do is put your name on a deed. Down at the crossroads, down at the crossroads. Dawn is breaking and the day is clear. There ain't no sign that you were ever here. The smell of brimstone and the smoke is gone. All that's left of you is in the song. Down at the crossroads, down at the standing at the crossroads, don't know which way to go, which way to go. Down at the crossroads, down at the crossroads.
On April 18, 1894, a young Methodist deaconess, Miss Abigail Simmons, brought the first of 6 young children from the Chicago area at what would be the beginning of the Lake Bluff Children's Orphanage. That first child, Edward Hall, arrived like a Christmas package with the simple words, Lake Bluff, on a tag strapped around his neck. Soon after, a brother and sister, Caspar and Greta Dunkleys, and 3 sisters, Lena, Cecilia, and Josie DeRona, arrived. The children were housed in a small rented cottage just a block east of the Northwestern Railway line connecting Chicago to Milwaukee. The children and Miss Simmons lived there until the fall, when they moved to the Deaconess Rest Home, a building that was heated. This humble beginning set the stage for what over the next 75 years would become a safe haven for thousands of children whose families were experiencing challenging problems or economic hardship. Lake Bluff, where the cottage was located, began to flourish in 1876 when a group of 57 influential Methodist men, under the leadership of Solomon Thatcher, formed the Lake Bluff Camp Meeting Association. Thatcher, a Methodist Episcopal minister, was a man of status and wealth. He brought nearly 200 acres of land which was devoted to cultural and recreational activities with an overriding religious purpose. Thatcher felt that if such a place did not exist under the protection of the church, people may drift to the fashionable watering places where lessons in extravagance, frivolity, and vice abound, and the bright, happy innocence of youth is imperiled in the pernicious excitement of balls and dress parades.
The Reverend Thatcher decided that he liked the idea of the Chautauqua camp meetings. Chautauqua had opened up in central New York State, and about maybe 1872, 1873, and the idea there was that you would bring in your middle-class people who now had time. This was something new. Spare time was something new, and they were anxious to be educated. So the idea is Dr. Vincent started the Chautauqua in New York, and then there were several others opening around it. And Thatcher thought that's what he wanted.
One of Thatcher's devoted followers, and one of the original founding fathers of the Lake Bluff Camp Meeting Association, was James B. Hobbs. Born in Maine in 1830, he came to Chicago with his wife, Mary Marilla, in 1887 and ran a prosperous produce commission business for 30 years, during which time he served on the Chicago Board of Trade as president in 1883. Through his passion and generous support of religious and charitable organizations, he became one of the most prominent Methodists in the Midwest. He lived by the slogan, "Make all you can, save all you can, and give all you can." In the summer of 1893, there were constant reminders of the growing economic problems of the country, which deepened into a 4-year depression.
So you had not only an upper class and a relatively wealthy middle class, you had a lot of poverty. And the idea came that there were many children who were, we would say, homeless children. Whether they were homeless or whether they were just set out, their parents couldn't really take care of them.
At this time, a movement of women who committed their life to the purpose of serving Christ and devoted their life to the church were ordained a deaconess, or women with a calling to serve God. The role of deaconess was socially acceptable at the time and allowed many women to function as ministers or servants in the role of caregivers and teachers. On May 1st, 1894, James Hobbs arrived for the annual meeting at the Epworth Chicago Deaconess Home in Oak Park.
The usual business was transacted. Then Hobbs announced he had been commissioned by a gentleman who anonymously purchased land for a new training school for the deaconesses. And he added he felt sure the Lord must mean to give us the additional money for the building, or he would not have given us the land to put the building on. In addition, Mr. Hobbs expressed his interest for the homeless children that the deaconesses had picked up in their ministrations here and there, and he had decided to build a house in Lake Bluff if the deaconesses could make use of it. He had brought the architect's plans thinking they might be of interest. It was only a little thing, he said, but would have room for some 50 or 60 of God's neglected little ones. Oh, Mr. Blackstone spoke most freely of what it might mean to rescue one little child from a life of vice and degradation. He said, "Our brother Hobbs calls it a little thing, this children's home he is giving us, but it means salvation for many little ones."
On Wednesday, November 7th, 1894, the Methodist Deaconess Orphanage's first building, a gift of Mrs. Mary Marilla Hobbs, was dedicated, and a metal box containing historic documents was encased in its cornerstone. The building became known as the Hobbs Hall. Abigail Simmons, the deaconess who had received the first children a year earlier in the rented home, was appointed matron. One might imagine the children from an orphanage staying for most of their childhood life. In truth, most of the children of this time were there only temporarily due to an unfortunate family circumstance, until the family could get back on its feet. Of the first 6 children who arrived that first April 1894, 3, the Derona children, returned home just 2 months later. Those 3 were quickly replaced by 2 brothers and a 2-year-old girl, keeping the number of children to no more than 7 at any given time. By 1898, the family of children at Lake Bluff had grown from 7 to 70, demanding full-time leadership. Lucy L. Judson, another Methodist deaconess, became the first resident superintendent in January 1898. A second building, again a gift from Mr. and Mrs. Hobbs, was dedicated on November 22nd, 1899. This building contained a dining hall and a kitchen. 2 more buildings were added to the growing orphanage. In 1902, a third building, dedicated as Wadsworth Cottage and used as a boys' dormitory, was given by Norman Waite Harris in memory of his mother. Harris, a prominent Chicago businessman, founded Harris Bank in 1882 and was a devout Methodist who made his fortunes in the banking and investment industry. The fourth building was given by Mr. and Mrs. Hobbs as a dormitory for older girls. More lots were acquired, and soon the entire block within which these buildings stood was purchased and donated to the orphanage, which by this time was providing for 140 children and 29 workers. The orphanage's second decade, 1904 to 1914, was marked by both advancement and sadness. New buildings were added for both educational and health purposes. The fast-growing family of children became too much of a burden for the local public school to handle.
Well, like every part of history, it's you have parts of it that you'd rather never happened or you'd like to hide under the rug. When the Methodist Deaconess Home started in 1894, they realized that, with the influx of children, and certainly by the late 1890s, they had 150 kids there. So they're going to have to be educated. And originally, they were educated in the Lake Bluff Public School, which had been a one-room school up until 1895, and then the original school over what we now call East School was built, a 4-room school, so that's where they were going to go. And they did, but all of a sudden, as I said, what started out as a very small and very few kids, all of a sudden, certainly by the turn of the 20th century, was very large. You had maybe 160, 170 kids in there, and that was an impact on the schools. And there was some concern among the local ladies and gentlemen that these children carried diseases. They didn't know where they came from. They were riffraff. They had no idea who their parents were. They were off the streets, all of that. And so therefore they had no place in the Lake Bluff School with the little darlings that were there, the children that were there. And it became quite a hubbub, quite a story. And in fact, finally, Around 1903, the school board at that time passed a ruling that they would no longer accept any children from the children's home in the Lake Bluff Public School.
The William Deering School was established to educate children on campus. The school, with 4 school rooms for grade school children, was built at the east side of the campus at a cost of $6,000 and dedicated September 22, 1904. Deering, an American manufacturer, pioneered the development of grain harvesters in the early 1900s, forming the nucleus of what is now today the International Harvester Company. The year 1904 also marked the beginning of the benevolence of the Swift family to the Methodist Deaconess Orphanage. In September of 1904, the former Deaconess Rest Home was remodeled and equipped as the first hospital unit and baby fold as a gift from Mr. and Mrs. Lewis Swift. Lewis Swift was the son of Gustavus Swift, who founded a meatpacking empire in the Midwest during the late 19th century. The second decade also is remembered for disastrous fires at the orphanage. Wadsworth, the boys' dormitory, burned December 6, 1906. Mr. Norman Waite Harris, who had given the original building, promptly paid for the building to be rebuilt. Another fire took place in Hobbs Hall in 1908, causing considerable internal damage, but the orphanage's darkest day occurred on Saturday, May 6, 1911. Shortly before 8 p.m., a fire swept throughout the Mary Marilla Hobbs building. Heroic efforts by the deaconesses with the help of neighbors brought 62 children to safety. Churches and individuals from miles around Lake Bluff responded promptly to a call for aid sent out by the orphanage in the morning. Automobiles and buggies drove up to the scene of the fire every few minutes during the entire afternoon, and each deposited bundles of clothing and supplies for the institution. The year 1911 also marked more sadness involving the Hobbs name, the death of Mary Marilla Hobbs. And just 3 years later, the orphanage lost its other founder, James B. Hobbs, at the age of 84. A touching moment in Hobbs's funeral service occurred when 20 children from the orphanage formed a procession to the front of the church, each laying a white rose on top of his casket in a tearful farewell. Only one new building marks the third decade, but it was significant because it represented the rise from the ashes of the fires, the first replacement of the home's wood-framed buildings with the construction of a new fireproof brick building. In November of 1915, Judson Hall was dedicated. The building was named in honor of Superintendent Lucy Judson for the care and leadership she had provided for almost 1,500 children. Public schooling again became an option for the children during this period. Over 100 children still remained in the 4-room Deering School at this time. But by the end of the third decade, children who wished to attend the Lake Bluff Elementary School were accepted for 7th and 8th grades. On November 1, 1924, the central pump and furnace broke at the orphanage. Out of this struggle came the addition of 4 new brick buildings. The first, built in the fall of 1925, provided power for all additional buildings that would be built during this era, and housed a laundry to provide clean clothes for 100 children and 30 staff members daily. In 1929, Lewis Swift gave the orphanage its most grandiose building to date. The Swift Healthcare Center, a 2-story building designed by Edward Shewey, contained a nursery called the Baby Fold, with the capacity for 18 babies ranging from infancy to 3 years. The hospital unit contained 14 beds, which enabled the quarantine of children during outbreaks of serious contagious childhood diseases that were common and sometimes life-threatening. In addition, there was a dental office where the children's teeth were checked and treated regularly, and a nurse's office where children were given first aid and emergency care. Shiwi was the architect for the Swift & Company and was responsible for the design and construction of all the Swift meatpacking plants around the country. Lewis Swift would have Shiwi design and oversee construction on all future orphanage buildings put on the campus. In 1930, the old Hobbs Dining Hall building was moved to a new site on the developing campus. Workers moved the building to an open area to make space for the grandest building, the Mackey Memorial Building. This new building was dedicated in 1931. It was a gift of Mr. and Mrs. Harry Milne McIntosh. In 1930, the Deering School had been condemned and schooling had been moved to the basement of a former dormitory. The Mackey Memorial Building was built as the primary replacement school building. The first floor contained school classrooms, a nursery, and administrative offices for the staff. The second floor contained more classroom space, a library, chapel, and a room for tutoring. The basement space was used primarily for industrial education space, including a print shop, wood shop, shoe repair, and clothes shops. Workmen and steam shovels continued with the task of adequately housing the children. In 1932, Lewis Swift, together with a brother and sister, gave yet another building in the memory of their mother, Anna M. Swift. This building housed 2 family units of 12 children each, from 3 to 6 years of age. Another new building, Wadsworth Harris Hall, dedicated in 1937, was the gift from N.W. Harris. The new Wadsworth building continued to serve as a boys' dormitory. By the end of the 1940s, the old dining hall, which had been moved, was deemed a fire hazard, and a drive to fund a new dining hall began. In 1950, the new facility, the Wesley Dining Hall, was officially dedicated. It was situated at the very same location as the original cottage to which the first children were brought in 1894. Minor improvements which completed the campus renovation included a new playground which was added in 1961 and dedicated to Rockwell Clancy, who had served as the president of the Children's Home Board of Directors for over 20 years.
Sailing your ship so far from home, the seas are rising, all your compass is gone. Can you find safe harbor to weather the storm? Somewhere you'll be safe and warm. Somewhere you'll be safe and warm. Never have to be alone again. Never have to be alone. Never have to be.
Now, the Methodist deaconesses were very much like the Roman Catholic nuns. They had set their lives aside to serve the church and to serve humanity, is their feeling. And they were trained as deaconesses, and that's why the orphanage to begin with was called the Methodist Deaconess Orphanage.
Lucy Judson was the first resident superintendent of the Lake Bluff Children's Home. She served in that capacity for 26 years. She was a Methodist deaconess, as were the first 3 superintendents, and their tenure, the first 3 superintendents, covered slightly more than 50 years in the history of the home. Lucy Judson was obviously well loved by the children and by her staff. She has beautiful scrapbooks filled with photographs of the children, and these are really a testimony to the fact that she served really like a loving parent And like many loving parents, she was strict. She ran a fairly strict household, but obviously the children and her staff adored her.
She was the one who kept the records. We have interesting records all in Lucy's handwriting. She was a very meticulous in her record keeping.
Danville, Illinois, 1915. A letter from the State of Illinois Department of Visitation of Children. Dear Miss Judson, it is evident that Callie, only 11 years old, is there to serve the family rather than to have a home. She is doing what is equivalent to a woman's work, and her schooling has been neglected. Please send for this child at once. Inform Mrs. B that if she needs help, she had better hire someone in place of keeping this child.
Chicago, Illinois, 1916. Dear Miss Judson, enclosed you will find a money order for $5 to apply to the Children's Board, and also $1 for William's birthday present. He can buy himself skates or anything he wants, or rather that he needs. Hope the children are all well.
She tried to make it as caring a facility, a home, as you can in any kind of residential setting. And when she came in the late 1890s, she actually turned that. She wanted her deaconesses well-trained. She wanted them to be child-caring, empathetic. She wanted the kids to have the very best home she had, and she fought for that. Every year, and if you look in the files here, every year she's got letters to the directors and to various organizations pleading for money for her kids. She started the thing of having an annual put out of a brochure telling them what their needs was, how much money they spent on food, how much money they spent on prescriptions and hospitalizations and all that, and how much it took just to house and feed and clothe a child. And she would go out and say, we really need money for this. And she was extremely eloquent. I think the most telling thing about her was finding the letters that her children, when they left the children's home and went out to be young adults, wrote back to her.
Dear Miss Judson, I am having a grand time. I just love it out here in the country. I've been going to school every day. We go to town pretty near every Saturday.
Joliet, Illinois, 1915. Dear Miss Judson, was very glad to hear from you, and to hear that I had brothers living was an awful surprise to me. I thought I was the only one left in this world. Did my brothers ever inquire about me? Did they ever know where I was? Do you think it would be good for me to write to them? Wouldn't it be fine if we could meet each other again?
Chicago, Illinois. Dear Miss Judson, in 3 weeks I gained a pound. I am getting along in school just fine. I am in the 5th grade. I hope you are all well. Dear Miss Judson.
Mrs. Arbuckle was a large woman, a frightening woman. I mean, when we were sent to Miss Arbuckle's office, it was because we had done something wrong. But I think, in all due respect to her, I think she was probably very fair. And she took a group of us to church every Sunday. We went to the Methodist church in Lake Bluff, but also to a church in Lake Forest. And I was with the group that she would take to Lake Forest. And she was, as I say, a large woman, very robust, and a very, very loud singer. And it was embarrassing to us. She dominated the auditorium when she sang.
Well, I think it's a little bit different from a children's viewpoint. She seemed like very stern and prim and proper. She was, as I learned later, a very well-educated person. And for many years after she left Lake Bluff, but she got involved with politics and did quite a bit of traveling to Washington.
Oh, he was a gem, and we all liked him so much, and he really did. Oh, everybody was, well, as you say, crazy about Bob Beers. He did well, and he was a likable person, and he did his job well.
Mr. Petrojic was the overall, the director, the top person that was in charge of the Lake Bluff Children's Home. My memory mainly was when we would be going into the dining room, the administrative staff, including Mr. Petrojic, had a little small dining area off to the left. As you would walk through, file through, they would be sitting there. Mr. Petrojic would always be looking out or facing out so he could make eye contact with us and smile, and we would wave back.
Coyd was just unbelievable from the standpoint of intellectual curiosity, and he was always searching and always learning about something new. He was all about change, and to him change was good. You know, you had to study the situation, and you had to be knowledgeable. You didn't change just to change. But the changes that he took the agency through, I believe, were all very beneficial.
Children lived in small family units, headed by a foster mother or later by foster parents.
Yes, I was recalled to service during the Korean War and was stationed at Great Lakes. My wife was in the process of finishing her college degree. When she finished with her college degree to come up here, she was looking for a part-time job, and I asked the chaplain at the Navy base if he knew such a program, and he suggested I come talk to the Lake Bluff Orphanage, which we did, and very fortunate that what followed, because we had a very enjoyable year here. It was just a natural relationship. And you could see the interrelationship between them, and we had a daughter, and she had 10 big brothers. Invariably, she'd be riding on somebody's shoulders. They were just that fond of her, and it was a good environment for them to have because, as it turned out, most of our kids went on to have families of their own, and they had children, and this was a way for them to experience a normal family life.
But they were, when you're a little kid, they were who you'd want to have, you know what I'm saying, to make you feel at home. All my other house parents that I had were great for the age they dealt with, but the worst were perfect for little ones. Well, what can I say? They cared. They actually, you could feel the care. It wasn't a job to them. They were there for kids.
There was a woman there, we spoke of her earlier. Her name was Bernadine Van Winkelmulder, believe it or not. They all called her Mumsy, and she went by Miss Mulder, or Mumsy mostly. All the girls called her Mumsy.
I remember we all were. She was kind of a disciplinarian, and she was concerned with the way we sat and the way we ate. And I remember every day we had oatmeal for breakfast, and she would say, you have to chew your oatmeal 17 times. And we would sit there and chew our oatmeal.
Dear friend, most of you received my Christmas letter last year after December 25, so that I could relate to you how I spent my first Christmas season here. Now I will write it before and not keep so many of you on needles and pins as to why I didn't even send a card. Our Christmas activities will be carried out very much the same. The big day at the church at Evanston, the Christmas day itself spent in private homes at Wilmette, both events which mean so much to these young lives. By the 1st of January, some of that awful newness of the whole picture had worn off some, so that one could wake up and think of the day's work a bit easier. Then too, by that time, I'd been weaned away a bit from Holland and First Church and all that that means in my life. The girls and I were acquainted with each other better by that time, so that all in all it made a brighter outlook. We took as our motto the words from Joshua, "Be strong and of good courage, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest." If God can use me to give a bit of sunshine, cheer, love into the hearts of those children from broken homes, with all that that involves, isn't it very much worthwhile? 23 have come and gone in the time I've been here, and I now have 15 left, and my hope and prayer is that the contacts with them may be for the upbuilding of beautiful Christian lives, and that they in turn may set up happy homes in contrast to theirs. Vrolijk kerstfeest. Merry Christmas. Beradine Finke Mulder.
My house parents, I lived in Judson too, and we had Mr. and Mrs. Stoltz, and they had a little daughter, Karen. My brother lived in another unit, the Swift unit, and his house parents were Mr. and Mrs. Worth. We also had a, not a substitute, but a part-time house parent, Mrs. Raymond, and she was very, very nice. She loved working there, and it was very apparent. The thing I remember most about Mrs. Raymond is when she would come in, she would turn on the lights in the hallway and say, "It's time to get up. We have to get up now. It's early and we've got to get our beds made." And she would come walking down the hall and look into each girl's bedroom and examine how they made the beds. We always made sure that the beds were made immaculately. I mean, no wrinkles, nothing. And she would call that the best perfect room. And she'd make some of the girls come down and say, "Now look at this room, look at the triple room where Heather and Shirley and some of the, who else was living there. It's just perfect. They keep it all neat, and this is the best room." And she always had a can of Lysol spray. I don't know why, but she would, room spray, and she'd spray that around and make it smell real nice and everything. And she just had a loving way about her, and she was very happy and upbeat all the time, and that made it great for us.
First house parents we had, and for the most time, were Bonnie and Harry Crammond. They were a married couple. Harry was a police officer in Round Lake Beach. Bonnie was the house mother, basically there all the time, even because Harry had to work shifts, and he worked as a police officer. He had to work different shifts and different hours, so she was the one who basically took care of us. She was comfortable with most of the kids there, so she brought her friends over, introduced us. She'd sit around, talk with her friends. She accepted us as just kids. She accepted us as a house mother, not that maybe we had social issues or we had problems or maybe we didn't have parents. So she was our house mother, that was her job. She understood, that we were just kids and trying to get along and go through life.
This was an enjoyable part of our lives. The year that I spent with these kids, it made a difference in my life. I hope that in some small way that we contributed to their lives too. Because to see the adversity that they experienced and how they handled it, they were our role models rather than the other way around in a lot of respects.
We were living in Judah, Wisconsin, which is not too far from Monroe, where we live now. And my father had a job cooking. He was a head chef at a very nice restaurant outside of Lake Bluff. And it was not ideal. We missed him and he missed being with his family. And so he was looking for something that we could do to bring us together. And he heard about this job at Lake Bluff Orphanage, and my brother and I could accompany my mother if she wanted that position or was offered that position. And it worked out that mother interviewed, she was interested, and so we moved.
My responsibility was to mother the boys and teach them how to live together. I must say this, my 14 boys have been without this kind of care for a long while, as no one would stay with them. They were completely out of control. My work was definitely cut out for me. My first night there, I was told by them that they had run off the past house mothers, and they would do the same with me, to which I answered that we would see who ran who off. My attitude was that of a tough top sergeant. They had to know and accept that I was there to stay. Above all, they had to know that I meant every word I said. Slowly, you could see and feel a family atmosphere coming over our group. I knew then I could start doing fun things with my family. I suggested a picnic supper down on Lake Michigan Beach. Thus, Jimmy, the cook, would prepare a picnic basket for 20. We would leave the campus with 17 of us and one orphanage dog. By the time we reached the beach, we would have an extra boy or two and a couple of their dogs. At the beach, we played games and had fun. Believe me, one had to have complete control to try that venture. The boys loved it, and we did that event several times a summer. We had ongoing contests with your status in the contest posted on the blackboard. If I entered the contest, I, along with the rest, had to have a witness to my score in the game. This they loved, especially if I missed an attempt at top score. I started a Cub Scout program for any boys interested in achievement projects. It was rewarding to see how caring the boys had become. Jerry was having a problem health-wise and was sort of listless and sad. As I put him to bed that night, Ernie came into the room with his teddy bear and put it in Jerry's arms. Such a tender and kind act. Jerry often thought of the kindness that prompted Ernie to give his bear away. I had now been at the orphanage almost 2 years. It was at this time Ivan announced that he had bought his Uncle Floyd Mansky's bottle gas business in Monroe. It was a complete surprise. Well, of course I couldn't consider doing what he asked, as I had obligations to the orphanage and to my boys. I decided to stay at the orphanage until the school year ended. I was sick about the situation, and I began to prepare mentally for this change. I gave a 60-day notice to Miss Brooks and began to prepare myself and the children for my leaving the first week of June, 1950. It was a sad time for all of us, but as we adjusted to the idea of parting, it became tolerable. Some days there were tears, some days just a quiet acceptance. There were farewell parties by the staff, lots of talking with the boys to help them understand.
She can bake your cake and fix your toys. She's a plumber with grace and a lullaby voice. But the greatest of her arts is the healing of a broken heart. Children don't know it. She has to work hard not to show it. But the hardest job, she sighs, is when it's time to say goodbye. Say goodbye. Say goodbye.
As my family and I drove away from the orphanage, the boys ran crying after the car. I thought I couldn't stand the pain of it all. However, as I know from my many past experiences, you do stand it, and you do go on.
Well, whenever there was someone new, of course, not everyone got to meet them right away. Usually just the girls in the unit that they were going to live in met them first. But at the first meal they went to, they would sing this song. We welcome you, we welcome you, we welcome you today. Oh, how glad we are to have you with us, well we may. We welcome you, we'd like to have you know that we are very glad to have you here at LBO.
When my brother and I were 2 years old, our mother died. So my father was left with two boys in the depth of the Depression. Work was not a sure thing then, and he couldn't by himself take care of us. And our grandmother was then getting kind of feeble, I would say, and she really couldn't handle us.
In 1938, I was 8 years old when my mother passed away. And at that time, a decision was made by my father that he couldn't take care of my sister, who was just a baby, just barely 2 years old. And it was through his brother, who lived up in Highwood, Illinois. We were in Chicago, and his brother in Highwood was working for a family who I believe were on the board at the Methodist Deaconess Orphanage in Lake Bluff. And I mention that because we were Catholic, but the orphanage was Methodist. So pulling some strings through management, so to speak, why they had us placed in the orphanage.
Well, when my parents, our parents, my sister was there also with me, divorced in '47, and we were wards of the court, and we ended up at Lake Bluff. She moved to Lake Bluff, got a job working for a doctor in town, so she had access to see us. We'd walk in school or walking home if she was not, working or doing something for the doctor she worked for. Always made it to her time, because she could see us Thursdays and every other Sunday, and she would make a point to be there.
We came to the home in January of 1961, and prior to that we lived with my aunt and uncle, the three of us kids, my older sister Gail and my younger brother Chip. The reason we had to move to the home is my parents were getting divorced, and it wasn't a very good situation at our house at all. My dad had a drinking problem, and my mother was trying to keep up with keeping us clothed and fed at times, and it just wasn't a very good situation.
I went there in 1959. My mom had me, which I vaguely remember a little, and we went to visit my aunts, which were distant aunts, Opal and Virginia Neal, and she just left me there. She tried, but she couldn't do it. That's all I can say. She tried, but she couldn't do it. The alcohol, I tried to believe that it was the alcohol anyway, but my grandma did tell me she had mental illness, She used to lock herself in a hotel room for 6 months at a time and just stay drunk.
I just remember my mom and I just never bonded. She always told me I was a mistake, and that was big to her, just to kind of beat me down. So I don't know. I had developmental issues when I was young that they didn't want to address or take care of. And so when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, they gave me up to a ward of the state.
It was strange because I wasn't with my mother, and I was with somebody that I didn't know, and it smelled different, and everything was different, and I didn't know my way around, but I don't remember having nightmares, and I don't remember having any time when I was scared out of my wits or anything. It was probably uneasy. After a while, I remember staying awake sometimes, and I would hear the clock that was in the living room way at the other end of the hall, and it would do the chimes, And to this day, when I hear the particular chimes, there's clocks all over the place that do this, I immediately think of the children's home.
I'm not going to say how I got there, how it came about, because it would make her look like a bad person, but she didn't do it for meanness. So we'll leave that part out. But, you know, it was for the best. You know, well, quite honestly, what she did, she said, let's go for an ice cream, which we used to do a lot. And I remember walking up to it and just thinking, that's a big ice cream parlor, you know. And, but yeah, we walked up to the main entrance, you know, and it's pretty big to a little kid. And so we walked in, and then they came out and talked to me. And I mean, I felt like they knew me, you know, which I didn't know them. I kept looking and hanging on to my aunt's hand, you know. And she started tearing up, which scared me. And she said sorry, and ran out the door.
I can still. Excuse me. I watched her walk away, and I didn't know why. But we were at the infirmary getting checked in, and my sister and I, and then all of a sudden she was walking away. But she came back, so it worked out.
Yeah, it was very, very frightening. You know, an 8-year-old kid being taken to another city, dropped off. And as I recall, my father didn't accompany me to the boys' dormitory. He dropped us off with the ladies in charge at the orphanage, and they accompanied me to the boys' dormitory building. And you know, being just 8 years old, it was strange, and I recall being very frightened. I had no idea what was ahead for me.
Although formally incorporated as an orphanage until 1955, the Lake Bluff Children's Home endeavored from its beginnings to create a home-like atmosphere. Over the years, it was commonly referred to as the home by both the institution itself and the Lake Bluff community. At the height of its operation in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, more than 100 children annually resided in the children's home.
Our routine, you know, we would get up like 6 o'clock in the morning. On our first job, of course, after dressing, we'd have to make our beds and clean our cubicles, dust mop the floors or sweep. That was everyone had to do that. And then certain of us had additional chores. Mine was then going down in I think 2 or 3 mornings a week. I had to go down to the various buildings and collect the dirty laundry and bring it up to the laundry building. I had a big old push cart that I would haul the laundry in.
Each girl had a different job to do. I can remember wiping down the steps that went down as far as the first landing. The girls that lived downstairs had to do the steps on their side of the landing. We had to do the steps on the upper landing. Then there were the girls that had to do wash all the wash basins in the lavatory and make sure that the tub was scrubbed clean after the Wednesday and Saturday night bath.
Everyone had chores, but I specifically worked in the laundry mostly, and I did work in the dining room too, setting tables and sweeping the floors in the dining room. I actually put sorted clothes, put them in the washing machines, these big industrial-sized washing machines. They allowed me to actually take clothes out of the wash machines and put them in the extractor. And the extractor is it could be a dangerous machine. But I put laundry in the extractor, and they taught me how to use the mangle. And again, it was a big mangle, big enough that you can run sheets through it. But and then I would have to, a lot of times, take finished laundry, bring them back down to the boys and the girls' dormitories.
The only thing they had to do on Saturday was polish their shoes, which they all had to do, and they had to line them up out in the hall so Mother could see how nice they did with the shoes. It sounds like she was an Army sergeant, but she really wasn't, because she mixed it with softness and affection, but sternness too.
The children said grace before each meal, and they took turns, and there was a plant that they put on the table that was to say the grace for that day. And the children all took turns saying grace.
One of the rules of a dining experience was that you had to wear a dress. And being a tomboy, I always liked to wear jeans. And I would roll up my jeans to my thigh and put them on a skirt. And when my mother found out, she was horrified. She said, "Oh my, you don't do that."
Specifically, I don't remember all the meals, but our routine was breakfast, dinner at noon, and then a supper at night. And you know, for the 8 years that I was there, we had every Saturday night was baked beans and cornbread. And I never got tired of them. I still love baked beans and cornbread. Every Thursday night and Sunday night, it was called sandwich supper. And we would go to the dining room and carry a big basket of sandwiches, and usually sandwiches and apples, you know, fruit. And we would take it back to our dormitory building, and that's where we would eat every Thursday and every Sunday night. We wouldn't go to the dining room. Otherwise, we had all of our meals in the dining room.
The staff all ate in a separate dining room, and I was kind of upset because I couldn't eat with my parents, and I ate with the kids, but that was the way it was.
They had what they called visiting Sundays at the children's home, and they were every other Sunday that a parent would come and visit. And as it worked out, I would see my mother once a month, and I would see my father once a month. My mother traveled from Glencoe in the train, and sometimes we'd meet her up there. One of the house parents would walk us up there, and we'd meet my mother, and then we'd walk back to the home, and we'd visit for a while, and then sometimes we'd walk into town and go over to, there was a park there that we would go and just play.
You didn't hear a lot about it, but you know, they always looked forward to every visiting Sunday, thinking maybe this Sunday my mom will come or my dad will come, you know. And so I know that was a big thing for them, that when visiting Sunday came, and it had to be very disappointing when nobody showed. And like I say, here again we had this. It seems to me that it was the same parents who showed up all the time, and the same kids who always sat there with no one.
Well, he came to visit very often when he wasn't on the road somewhere on a job. He worked in radio at a fairly good level most of the time. And at some point he went to work in the I always thought it was a ship-to-shore radio station, the Lake Bluff radio station, marine radio station. When he was working there, he could come quite often, and then he'd take us there to see him work. And we saw him working, and he had a handkerchief hanging out of his back pocket because he just wanted to be able to grab it because his hands were dirty from what he was doing, and soldering or something. And oh, that was great. So we went back to the orphanage, and now we went everywhere with a handkerchief hanging out of our back pocket. And this upset the teachers something awful, you know, because other kids were starting to do it too. This was a very adult thing to have a handkerchief hanging out of your pocket. So they called him in, and he had to come in, and he had to tell us tonight, please don't do that, or you're upsetting the teachers.
And very seldom did we see her. And then sometimes we didn't want to see her because she'd come drunk. So either the children's home wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't let her, or we'd get there and we don't want to be there. So, you know, and so it really came to the point where it didn't bother us if she didn't show.
It broke our hearts as well as the kids to see our kids disappointed like that. But they all had been through such difficult situations in the past that they could handle it fairly well.
They had their own little bank books that they would bring to the office, and I would have it all ready for them to pick up. And they were allowed to go uptown and pick up something from the drugstore. They loved to do that. And then they went to Sunday school, so they had to have a little bit for that. And I don't know whether they were Girl Scouts. It seems to me like they had to save a little out if they belonged to Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts.
We had a nice clinic. You can call it a clinic or hospital, but I remember there were hospital beds there. And occasionally some of the boys were sent down to the clinic for whatever reason I wasn't aware of at the time. But we would go there, I don't recall if it was once a week for cod liver oil. I can remember lining up in the clinic for our spoonful of cod liver oil once a week. Terrible. None of us liked it. And I remember during a flu epidemic, no, it was a scarlet fever, I think. We had to go down to the clinic for scarlet fever shots. And we were all quarantined. We didn't even go to school for a week or so.
We had, I have to assume, new house parents. And we were giving them some trouble, and I was on top of a table. Well, it had clothing on it, and I fell and slipped and broke my left. At that time, my left wrist, didn't know it was broken. And I'm not sure if the house parents stayed or what, but I broke a collarbone, roughhousing. I went through a barbed wire fence on a sled, you know. Unlike a family home, we had an infirmary, so if you were sick, you know, you had a cold or you had something else going on, measles, or you know, you had somewhere to go, and you had professional care, you know, there. So.
Religious education and daily devotionals were an integral part of daily life at the home.
I remember the house parents being very concerned that they behaved, you know, and they'd be very restless because they didn't want to be always sitting properly in a church, you know, and impressing somebody. They wanted to get out and play or go to Sunday school. It was more fun. So there was a lot of shh, shh, shh going on in the back pews, you know, and just rowdy, normal kids. They were wonderful.
That we would go to church and get a good understanding of the religion in a very easy way. It was there, we went, and then we'd, of course me, with loving to eat, we'd come home and have a nice Sunday dinner in the children's home at the dining hall.
One of the things that happened every evening in the girls section, I'm not sure about the boys, but in the girls, was devotions. And I used to go over there every evening at 7 o'clock for devotions. And then when my sister was born, I stayed in the unit, and because of course my dad had to work all day. And so I stayed in the unit with them, and I learned all the little prayers that they sang or said in the morning when they got up, or in the evening when they went to bed. And of course got to be part of the crowd then. I also got to polish the shoes on Saturday, which was the one job I didn't want.
Yeah, our evening routine, we had 8 to 10 boys in an open cubicle. They each had their own little section of that, but it was open. And as wound up as youngsters are, why it's pretty tough for them to calm down at night. But our guys did really well. We would talk about events of the day and anything that they had done or any questions that they wanted to ask. And then we would end up with, I would sing taps to them, Gone the Sun, and so forth, and God is Nigh. And that was our kind of our evening prayer. And then we traditionally would turn on soft music in the area. We had no problems at night at all, which is, as I say, pretty amazing with kids 8 to 10 years old in an open setting like that. It went pretty well. It was kind of a meaningful time of the day.
One of the sweet things that Mother did, and she did many, when they'd go to bed at night, it was a dormitory room, big room. The room was as wide as the building. And it had partitions that went not to the ceiling, but high enough that each, two boys in each cubicle, and each one felt they had a roommate. Not part of this huge room, but in fact there was this huge center section. And Mother, once they were in bed, had a bit of a quiet time, and she'd read to them. Then she always said a prayer with them. And I'll never forget the night she sang the Lord's Prayer.
We got opportunities to go places for things that were donated or tickets or whatever. One place I do remember going in Chicago was to see Victor Borg, who was a narrator of stories, at least that's what I remember. We also saw the Harmonicats. We had opportunities. We went to the circus. We went to Riverview every year. We got a chance to see movies at the local movie house. So there was a lot of things that we got to do. I think that we were fortunate.
We went to see Olson and Johnson, who were a very well-known comedy team. And we went to see Two-Ton Baker, the music maker. He turned around and asked this one little girl if she wanted to come and sit on his lap, and she said no. And he said, "No, why not?" She said, "Because your tummy's already sitting on it." He was a very big, heavy man. Very talented too.
Civic groups would come and put on special programs for us. And one time the civic group, someone in the group had Oriental clothing. I was asked to model along with other girls. And we got to sit up in front of all the people while whoever was doing the presentation talked about the dresses and showed them that. That was special. So we had a lot of advantages that probably regular children in normal households didn't have. I mean, people went out of their way to remember the children who lived there and give them opportunities.
Tried to do extracurricular things around so the kids could get involved, and that involved going up the Great Lakes where I was stationed. They had rodeos, boxing matches. The Chicago Bears gave us tickets so that we went to some of the Bears games. But as a special event, the boys had a week of vacation, spring vacation, and they attended public school. So we had planned a trip that we were going around Lake Michigan camping out. We had a station wagon and a trailer that we pulled. And all of the boys weren't able to go. The dishwasher from the orphanage went with me to help supervise the kids. So we got over to Ludington, Michigan, and we were in camping, and they thought they saw a deer. So we all went tearing through the woods tracking this deer, and never saw the deer again. So came back to camp kind of disgruntled at that. And there in the camp were 3 deer grazing when we got back. So,
well, they had movies, the old Western movies, Roy Rogers and Lone Ranger, and you'd have swimming sessions, and it was open swimming. We'd swim with everybody else. So it was, I think, mostly during the winter, because during the summer we went down to the lake quite a bit. Even though it was cold, we still went.
I was allowed to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was at Arden Shore or other group homes. I joined the Boy Scouts. I did swim meets when we were 8th grade over at the high school.
They let me be in the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and after school events such as sporting events at the grade school.
One of our kids, who would have been about 7 years old, probably 7 or 8 years old, had taken up the grade school orchestra, and he was proud of the fact that he was playing his violin, and he asked my wife to make sure that he came to their concert that they were having, which she did. And afterwards, he was very pleased that she came. Afterwards, he says, they wouldn't let me touch my bow. Apparently his musical skills were not what they could have been. So he participated, but he wasn't allowed to touch his strings, so he really wasn't playing. But it was the early vision of lip syncing, I guess, because he was lip syncing with his violin.
Probably the members of the Methodist Church of Des Plaines had a lot to do with our being able to go to camp. It was right on the Des Plaines River, and it was a beautiful place, and owned by the Methodist Church. And every summer, some of the children from the children's home got to go to camp there. And on 2 occasions, I was taken with some of the girls from the girls' unit. And the building that we stayed in was a great big 2-story building, and it had big porches on the first story, and also screened-in porches on the second story. And on the second-story porches there were cots, and of course inside there were bedrooms and cots upstairs too. But all the bigger girls got to sleep on the cots outside, and the little girls had to stay inside and sleep inside.
At the orphanage we had a huge flag, and it must have taken 40 or 50 of us kids to carry this flag. We would carry it, and we'd walk in the 4th of July parade, and people, they would throw coins up into the flag. But I marched in that parade for several years with the orphanage group. I marched in that parade as a Cub Scout, as a Boy Scout, and also as part of the American Legion baseball team. So I've been in that parade, quite a few times.
Each of us with a little flag. There must have been 30 of us in the back of this truck. I thought it was a glorious sight. I've never seen so many flags all at once.
Well, one 4th of July I remember very well, because I was chosen to be on the Abbott Laboratories float, and it was a big, beautiful float, and I got to hold on to shakers that you shake, like the cheerleaders, pom-poms or whatever, and I would, as the float was going through Lake Bluff, I would shake the pom-pom and smile, and it was really something neat. I enjoyed it. I was scared, but I enjoyed it.
Christmas was a special time, of course, and every Christmas we would take the Northwestern train down to Wilmette, and we would spend the day with a family. And my sister and I and one other girl went to the same family's home for quite a few years.
We also were invited to the First Methodist Church of Evanston. They had a Christmas brunch for us. Always had entertainment, a magician, a movie, something of that nature. And then we were taken to another large room where there was a big Christmas tree with all kinds of presents, and Santa Claus was there. And they would have games where they would have the children come down and participate in these games, and the winners, of course, would get a prize. One of the girls from our group got picked to go down, and she ended up with a Shirley Temple doll, and everyone was envious of her with that beautiful Shirley Temple doll, and no one spoke to her all the way home.
Christmas time was usually a time that most of the kids at the home go and stay with their families for a few days during the Christmas holidays. But there was one time that neither one of our parents could make it to the children's home to pick us up, and there were a couple of kids that were there with me, and we had gifts to open that were donated by the surrounding communities. I received a real pretty doll, but it was obviously like a donation, and they made it new again for us. It was a good thing. It was a cool thing. And they made it a happy time. Even though we weren't with our families, it was a happy time.
From its beginning, the Lake Bluff Children's Home served as an adoption agency, primarily but not exclusively for infants.
My very, very strong memory was the nurse coming in with her white starched uniform and the cap, holding an infant that had just been born and a few days old, and then the parents that were to adopt it would come, and it was a joyful time.
When the babies went out for adoption, there was a little chapel upstairs in the building that they would take the baby and do a little ceremony before the babies went home with their adoptive parents. I always remembered that because when the people come downstairs with they have to be right past my desk, and I just enjoyed seeing the joy in the people's faces that they got the baby they wanted so long.
My mother had given me away when she had gone to Chicago, and my adoptive parents adopted me when I was 3 months old. I always wondered what was my life like that first 3 months that I was in the orphanage. I knew that I had been in the hospital, I had been released to them at 2 weeks old, and I had been adopted at 3 months old. What happened in that 3 months? I didn't know what the orphanage was like. Was it like in David Copperfield movies, or was it like in the Annie movies, you know, those horrible visions you have of orphanages? Or was it a nice place with, you know, that people, that they had volunteers that rocked you and sang you lullabies and played with you? Or did they leave you in a bed all day and changed you when you were wet and fed you when you were hungry? You know, who was it? You know, I had pictures of my daughter. We took millions of pictures. And when she had her children, those first 3 months, you know, you take pictures. I didn't have those pictures. I didn't have the names. You know, even if a child is born, you may not have met everybody or have memories of that first 3 months, but you have pictures. You know, Aunt Susan was there and Grandma was there. It's a funny feeling not knowing who was there. If I could go back in time, I would like to visit with my mother the last day that she gave me up, the last time that she held me. I would like, I would like to have known what it felt like to be held by a mother that had that mother's heart. And to have asked her, I know why she did it, because she was from a very dysfunctional family. But I would like to have known what it felt like to her to hand that baby over.
Over the facility's history, many young children were placed for adoption during adolescence, often making the process more challenging. The extent to which prospective parents acknowledged the unique challenges associated with these children largely determined their pattern of a positive adjustment.
You were a mixed up kid.
and that came, I think, along with the baggage you had from the original family. I was in three placements, three foster homes before I came to the children's home. Some of them were really not so nice, but I also was a handful at the time because I think I just had a lot of baggage.
When they said we could have weekend visits with John, and we would pick him up, and this is like in March, and Rosemary had a convertible, and when we'd go back to the children's home, we'd always have to stop a couple of blocks away and put the top down.
No matter
because
how cold it was.
John thought that was
the
really
top was
cool
down.
to drive up in that convertible with the top down, even though it was really cold.
It was cold.
We met John in the spring, and by July, the adoption is all final.
Many times I would test them and say, you know what, you're going to be like everybody else. You're going to send me back, you're mad at me, and you're just going to send me back like all the others did.
That's it, I'm going back to children's home. And he'd stomp out of the house.
We would go across the street and he'd hide in the trees. They had this beautiful set of trees down the boulevard, and we knew he wasn't going to go very far.
I had said that so many times, I think my parents had just about had it in a positive way. So one day my dad, after I had said, you're going to send me back like everybody else did, he took me by the hand and he took me down into the basement. And I didn't know really what was going to take place, whether it was going to be a spanking, and I hadn't had any spankings from them. I had nothing but love. But we went down to the basement and we grabbed my old suitcase, which they had. I mean, this is the old suitcase with a sticker or two on it. Grabbed that off of a shelf, and he walked me upstairs, and we went outside, and he proceeded to build a fire next to a tree on the property.
First we broke it up by hitting it with a hammer. And while we were breaking it up, we called it, you lousy suitcase, John is not going anywhere. We're going to destroy you. We're going to get rid of you. You're going to get out of our lives. We got it all beat up.
But he threw that suitcase on to the fire and had said, you are my son. I love you. You are never going anywhere.
I think the only thing that a foster parent has to be aware of is that they really make a commitment that they can end, whereas a natural parent really they have to, whatever they do with the child, they reap the benefit or the sorrow.
Through the efforts of Orville Bright, who was the principal of the grade school, apparently he got in on the conversation with Mrs. Burkill and Mrs. Emma and talked about me, and Mrs. Burkill apparently took an interest in me and decided to invite me to dinner on a weekend at their house. Now, the Burkills had two daughters who were both younger than I was. I think one was 3 years younger and the other was 6 years younger. But they invited me to dinner on a weekend, and apparently everything went well. And they asked me if I would like to live with them after graduation. And of course I was excited, and I accepted. I don't know how much my acceptance of their invitation to live with them, I don't know how much water that held, but the decision was made by everyone who was responsible to let me go live with them. And actually, as I recall, I keep thinking that I went with them right after graduation, but actually I moved in with them about a week before graduation from grade school. So I was living with them when we had our graduation ceremony. And that began a whole new, very, very important chapter of my life, of becoming not one of the orphanage kids who had been there for the last 8 years, but for the first time a real citizen of the village of Lake Bluff.
Churches throughout the Rock River Conference of the Methodist Church, Northern Illinois, and the numerous civic organizations and individuals help support the children's home through financial contributions and donations of material goods such as food and clothing.
Each of the Methodist churches in the area, all up and down the shore, had their own auxiliary for the Lake Bluff Children's Home.
The Women's Guild that ran this was a very powerful group of women from Chicago and the North Shore, Methodist women.
The Harvest Home Festival was an annual fundraising event held on the grounds of the home each September. The festival included a bazaar featuring the sale of foodstuffs and handicrafts, a luncheon, and a tour of the campus buildings. First held in the year 1900, the festival proceeds helped fund the home's food budget.
They served a lunch, there were booths where you could buy foods, and it was heavily attended not just by residents of Lake Bluff and Lake Forest, but by people who had connections with the home through other churches throughout northern Illinois.
I remember the skirt lady, and she had a big hoop skirt, and the skirt had rows and rows of pockets, and they were small up at the top and larger down at the bottom. 25 cents, it may have been balloons or bubbles or a yo-yo, things like that.
Many residents of Lake Bluff and other North Shore communities served on the home's Board of Trustees or as members of its auxiliary organizations.
We moved to Lake Bluff in 1961. And one of the projects through the circles and just the neighborhood black people was a project that they did the laundry for the new babies that were being put up for adoption. So every time a baby was going to be adopted, they would have a new set of clothing, and then the adopting parents would bring a set of clothing, and the baby would probably only have the laundered clothing on maybe a couple, 3 hours. And then they would be exchanged with the adoptive parents' clothing. So it was deemed necessary that these clothing be washed and ready for the next usage.
When I graduated from 8th grade, I went over to Miss Brooks, and I had babysitting for years, and I had 15 children, 3 to 5. And I started at 6 in the morning, and I worked till 10 at night, and my paycheck was 25 cents an hour. When I had a day off, I took 1 or 2 children home, and I felt it was so important, and my mom and dad were all for it, where we'd sit in the dining room and have dinner together, and we'd go out on the porch and play games, where they knew where I lived, and I wanted them involved, and I did this, and by the time I left to go to college, I'd had all the children that I took care of at my house, and it was a different way of communicating with them, and the children's home were all for it, so I'm happy that happened.
I imagine everybody can say this, but I got caught stealing bubblegum, simple as that, and I think I was almost 9. And I got caught, and he didn't say nothing to nobody, but he told me I had to come back to the store after school. So I did. And then he taught me how to use a broom to sweep the floors, and so I had to do that every night after school, just long enough, 15, 20 minutes, so I'd still get back to the children's home before they thought anything, because we always kind of goofed off on the way home, back from school. And then next thing I know, I'm stocking shelves, and then he's paying me with candy, bubble gum. He said, "Now you don't have to steal it," stuff like that. And that's another man that really has a huge place in my heart. Because he let me know that wasn't a good thing, But he also let me know that it's not bad to make it right. Okay, I made a mistake. Now sweep the floors and we'll move on, but don't do it no more. And then he rewarded me by being a good kid. And so then next thing I know, he's saving money for me, which I didn't have, and the children's home would find it and you know, they didn't think I needed that money, so they want to save it for me, which is okay. When he found out, he saved my money and kept it for me. If I was going on a trip, he'd sneak it to me, stuff like that. One of the nicest guys that you could ever meet. That wasn't part of the children's home.
So many other things exist to this day as reminders of the Lake Bluff Children's Home. The metal time capsule box, discovered in 1955 when the original wood-framed orphanage building, later known as the administrative building, was razed, is in safekeeping at the Lake Bluff History Museum. Its contents, original newspaper clippings and deaconess newsletters from the day the orphanage was dedicated. Also contained is the original Marilla Hobbs orphanage sign, which once hung proudly outside the orphanage when it first opened its doors in 1894. An autographed ball from the 1960s containing the names of children who once played with it on the giant softball field, an item which was brought back by house parent Carl Worth on a return visit to Lake Bluff with his granddaughter Vicky Motes after his wife Vera passed away. Carl and Vera are not just remembered by the children they cared for, but also by a dedication brick that bears their names and is located outside our town's museum. If you walk around the block where the children's home once stood, you'll notice an occasional sidewalk path that leads to nowhere, which comes to an abrupt dead end in the grass. This was once the walkway that took prospective parents to the Swift Healthcare Building, where they would get their first glimpse of that new baby they were about to adopt. A short distance away, in our neighboring town of Lake Forest, our community high school's performing arts auditorium has been the venue for countless talent shows and musicals over the years. The theater bears the name of the young boy who gained entry onto a train from Chicago in 1904 at the age of 7 by singing his own song, "Jesus is My Sunbeam," to make his way to the Lake Bluff Orphanage, the high school's first principal and superintendent, Raymond Moore. Raymond Moore's final resting place is located just half-mile east of the auditorium at Lake Forest Cemetery, overlooking scenic Lake Michigan. His grave marker, ironically, is located just a short way from the mausoleum of the Swift family, who were the largest benefactors of the Lake Bluff Orphanage. In sharp contrast, just 75 yards from the Swifts, there is an open area of lawn with few markers or headstones. This patch, known as the single gravesite, is the resting place for many from impoverished working class of the late 1800s and the early 1900s who labored on the Lake Forest estates. This is also the site where almost every child from the Lake Bluff Orphanage who perished due to scarlet fever or the great influenza epidemic of 1918 lies, including an unmarked grave of the only child to perish during the orphanage fire in 1911, the 2-year-old twin boy, Richard Miller. The Lake Bluff History Museum remembers the children's home in its biannual Ghost Walk in October through enactments portraying touching stories about life in the orphanage. As the shattered remains of the children's home buildings lay in piles in 1979, bricks were gathered up by residents with wheelbarrows in hand. Countless front walkways and backyard patios were built from the same bricks once used to provide a stable setting in a child's life. In the Lake Bluff Village Hall, the chandeliers that once hung in the children's home's beautiful dining hall now grace the Village Hall entranceway and the board meeting room. A new historical marker was dedicated this past fall at the corner of where the orphanage administrative building once stood. The marker stands as a small reminder of the beautiful Georgian brick buildings that once occupied the same space and pays homage to the children and the staff that spent a portion of their lives in Lake Bluff. More than just tangible items you can see, touch, and feel, the same spirit of giving and providing care for children still continues within the community through countless charitable efforts.
The endowment was set up as the Lake Bluff Homes for Children Endowment Fund. and it still has that name. While the agency has gone and changed their name to ChildServe. I still serve on that endowment board and continue. The endowment is now up about 17 million, and contributes about $1 million a year to the agency, and is a very potent influence on ChildServe.
The Lake Bluff Children's Home still lives. I mean, and it comes by way of our stakeholders, by people telling wonderful stories and making us stop and think about, how we once provided services, and makes us think about how we can continue to transform those services today. Lake Bluff is important to ChildServe because we hold the same value system. We have the same mission. It's just framed for the 21st century today. But it all comes down to wanting to help a child and his or her family build a better life.
I've been a member of the Grace Church family for over 50 years now, and I can remember several of the women who served as house mothers at the children's home. And if I close my eyes, I can remember the children marching across the street on Sunday mornings to sit in the back 3 pews in the church sanctuary. And then they'd go on and fill the Sunday school to overflowing. So those were very, very happy times. The Methodist Church supported very much the children's home in its very beginnings, and it continues to this day in several ways. It contributes very sincerely and happily to United Voices for Children, and also to the ChildServe program of parent empowerment. We're very much interested in that right now. And most vividly, the Christmas program, where we give gifts to the children in needy families to the communities to our north. And these little children represent for us all those parents who sadly put their little children on the train and sent them up to Lake Bluff so many years ago because they couldn't adequately care for them due to hard times. And in the children's home, the children received the compassion and the nurture that they so desperately needed, and it continued in the new name, ChildServe, which we continue to serve to this day. And how could we not?
Though the orphanage is gone, the Grace Methodist Church still provides a home these days for children, ones with disabilities. Walk With Me, Conductive Education Therapy, a program for children afflicted with cerebral palsy, calls Grace Church its home. If you happen to find yourself near the church on a warm Saturday afternoon, you can witness children from the surrounding communities out for a stroll with walkers and canes, many who were told they'd never walk doing just that, so they can learn to become more independent, and hopefully, just as the kids at the Lake Bluff Methodist Orphanage, have a better chance in navigating through the challenges in life. Small-scale residential programs for children and adolescents with emotional and behavioral problems were operated for a period of time in the 1960s and early 70s, but were gradually phased out. Throughout the 70s, the building sat mostly vacant on the campus. Several local groups and organizations rented and used space on the campus as the board of directors and village officials struggled to decide the fate of the facility.
The campus was, there was no way to utilize it. You couldn't make it pay for itself in in providing services to children, number one, but also you couldn't make them office buildings, you couldn't make them residences, you couldn't do anything with them. They were special purpose buildings that you couldn't do anything with.
The village board and many community leaders all felt a sense of responsibility and all hoped that a use could be found for these beautiful, beautiful buildings. Unfortunately, we know that that did not happen. People really gave it a hard look. It was considered as a possible place for condominiums, senior housing, even a small college, Shimer College, looked at it as a possible campus. The village looked into the possibility of using it for municipal office purposes. The sad truth was that nobody could afford to convert the building with the technology that was available in the 1970s. I feel very sad about it, but I don't think we left very many stones unturned. That doesn't ease me of my guilt about it, though.
Repeated efforts to sell the Lake Bluff buildings for alternative institutional use were unsuccessful. By 1979, it was determined that the buildings would have to be razed.
I watched as they tore down the children's home, and it was a very, very tears rolling and a heartbreaking thing to see.
So as they were using the wrecking ball to break through the buildings, which the walls were built so thick that as the ball would hit the walls, the whole neighborhood had shaking of their dishes and other things. I had things falling off my shelves.
Devastation. Personal, for me personally, when I discovered that the buildings were gone, I just couldn't believe it. You know, a reference point in my life was gone.
One of the most poignant descriptions came from longtime local resident Frank Townsend.
In March 1979, villagers watched regretfully as the wrecking ball attacked the familiar buildings. But the buildings themselves seemed almost to resist the action. Time after time, the ball would bounce back from a wall without any apparent damage being inflicted. And hour after hour, the earth would quake from the impact of the reluctant closing of a significant chapter to Lake Bluff's history.
I can't tell you how many people have asked me the question, why are you doing this film project? The most logical guesses have been around my relationship with Tony and playing at the children's home while growing up. While this is partially true, it isn't the main reason. From the start of this project, events have happened that have been hard to explain. Originally, this was going to be a short 20-minute film. Tell how the orphanage got started, talk about the staff and the kids who live there, finish with the buildings coming down, boom, done. That all changed when I heard about Linda, the 3-month-old infant adopted out of the Lake Bluff Orphanage in 1948. She had randomly posted a blog on her 60th birthday about how sad she was and the dark hole that existed in her life. She went on to explain about her first 3 months of life in the Lake Bluff Orphanage and how her adoptive mother eventually became an alcoholic. She also always wondered who were some of the people who cared for her and what life was like those first 3 months in the orphanage, which she had no record of. This information came to me through a forwarded email from the editor of our town's local website, Gazebo News. I soon realized I had the answers and photos for many of the things this woman had wondered about. How could I not help her? After I contacted Linda, she granted me access to her file from ChildServe. I was able to find out more facts about her first 3 months of life than she had ever hoped to know. Her caseworker report completely contradicted in meticulous detail about everything she had been told about her birth and even her time in the orphanage. I flew down to Georgia a week before Linda's 61st birthday to share my findings and presented her with a video which featured pictures and memories of her main caregiver, Nurse Katie Patterson, told through the eyes of Katie's daughter, Cynthia, whom I had discovered in Central Illinois. Also featured in the film was May Purcell Stein, who lived in a nursing home in New Mexico. May worked in the baby fold at nights and rocked and held Linda. Linda, who had threw out a blog on the internet, was finally able to put a face to the women who held her first 3 months of life. In mid-December of 2009, I happened to see clippings in several children's home scrapbooks of a boy named Richard Moley. One article from the 1940s was about an annual Christmas visit he and his sister took to Wilmette to spend Christmas with the same hosting family each year. I saw that he eventually went on to Lake Forest High School and starred on a football team which went undefeated for 4 straight years. On a hunch, I called the high school administrative office and asked to speak to the person who was in charge of the Alumni Association. I received a call back that day from the high school receptionist who said, "My retired mother worked at the high school for years and now heads the Alumni Association. Not only can my mom get you Dick's information, but she was in his wedding." After obtaining Dick's information, I phoned him and in my best telemarketing voice informed him of the project I was working on and about the newspaper Christmas article. There was a long pause, and then Dick finally answered, "Craig, you're not going to believe this. I was literally sitting on my couch thinking of Christmas, my sister Beverly, and how I used to spend those in Wilmette, just as the phone rang. And then it was you." I later went to Surprise, Arizona, where Dick is retired and lives with his wife, Ronnie. He has volunteered for 9 straight years at the spring training facility of the Texas Rangers, where he is affectionately known as the General.
Lake Bluff is where I grew up. All of grade school, all of high school, and after school. I lived in the area for a couple more years. But I felt like a real stranger because I was walking the streets and nobody recognized me. I didn't recognize anyone. And as I like to make a comment on that, I think when I was walking around that day, everyone that I saw wasn't even born when I lived in Lake Bluff. So I knew a lot more about Lake Bluff than the people living there did. But then a thing that really bothered me quite a bit is we saw right in town, we saw the Veterans War Memorial. And a lot of names, I knew most of the names on it. And my name wasn't on that war memorial. And why that struck me as hard as it did, I'm not sure, but I really felt that here I was home, and yet I wasn't home. According to the records, which I say the war memorial were a big part of, the records of Lake Bluff, I didn't exist. I didn't live there. And I really felt bad about that.
In early 2010, I was forwarded a lead on the children's home from Janet Nelson, one of our town's historians. The email had been picked up on a Lake Bluff Google alert. The email's content was a sermon preached from 2002 from Iowa's Cornell College chaplain Kathy Quealy Engel. Content of the sermon mentioned a house mother from the Lake Bluff Orphanage from the 1940s, Millie Boyer, who happened to be Kathy's grandmother. Though the sermon was 8 years old, I found Kathy still worked at the college through the campus directory. I left a message late one night on the campus office line, letting her know about the project I was working on and asking if I could speak to her about her grandmother. The next morning, I received a voice message back from Kathy. "Craig," she said with kind of an unsure voice, "this is Kathy Quealy. You left me a message last night about my grandmother, Millie Boyer. Craig, I was up until 2 a.m. last night working on a memoir and was writing about my grandmother and her time at the Lake Bluff Orphanage. My jaw hit the desk when I came in this morning and your message was the first on my voicemail." Kathy gave me contact information for her mother, Janine, Millie's daughter, and her uncle, Jerry Boyer, Millie's son. I left phone messages for each, and a few days later, Jerry and I had a great conversation. Over time, and through another strange twist and turn of events, I located Ernie, one of the boys Millie had cared for, who was part of the group who had plans to run Millie out. Ernie was the boy who had given Millie's son Jerry his teddy bear while he lay sick in bed at the children's home. I eventually interviewed Ernie for this film and presented him with a package sent from Spearfish, South Dakota.
Oh. You're kidding me. You have to read the note. Dear Ernie, finally, Ernie, I have this chance of a lifetime. It's going to be hard. To thank you for your teddy bear. As I laid sobbing in the small sewing room of the big orphanage building for the first night separated from my family at age 4. It was those tears of despair that I frequently heard throughout the halls, and unselfish love in sharing that quickly grew into a brotherhood of boys who knew loneliness in a far greater depth than I. For as many years as I can remember, Teddy was a special friend and always took center stage under our Christmas tree in memory of your gift of love in 1947. It is a sad day to say goodbye to Teddy after these 64 years, but a joyful day for Teddy reunited with his dad. Oh man, that's not fair. Only you, Ernie, know how much love you lent me that. Teddy is reunited with his family with my love. I know my thoroughly modern mother, Millie, who we lost just a few years ago at the age of 92, is very pleased with this day, as a copy of her personal memoirs will attest. She always spoke so fondly of you, Tony, Johnny, and the other boys, that she could always call out by name. She even made attempts to find you and the others in later years, but no avail, as she understood the confidentiality of orphanage records. So that my lost and found friend of nearly 7 decades ago, may Teddy cuddle your heart and snuggle your spirit, as only a teddy bear can do. Jerry Boyer, love, Jerry.
The year 2010 marked a milestone in Lake Bluff as our town celebrated its 100th 4th of July parade. And as you watch the parade, amidst the great bands and great floats, there are hints and reminders of the children's home too. The Children's Parade still starts the parade each year as kids ride decorated bikes or walk just as the kids did long ago from the children's home. Cub Scout Pack 42 continues to march or ride in the parade each year, just as they did 64 years ago with Children's Home house mother and den leader Millie Boyer. Pretty young girls still adorn the tops of convertibles and floats, waving to everyone, just like Heather Madsen did, who rode on the Abbott Laboratories float in the 1960s. Grace Methodist Church's parade entry, a horse-drawn carriage, is reminiscent of the one Miss Lucy Judson, the orphanage's first superintendent, used on the streets of Lake Bluff, helping with the daily duties of running the orphanage in its early days. The ever-enthusiastic Nancy Dunn still watches and waves at the parade each year, just as she did with her beloved Garth, the young college athletic director who would later become her husband, and the small girls from the children's home they brought with them to the parade. My brother Kurt and his friend Tony continue to renew their childhood bond by marching in the parade each year as part of a group they formed back in 1976. The North Avenue group, named after the street we grew up on and that bordered the children's home, is always a bit wacky. Most years, no one, including myself, really has any idea what the heck Kurt and Tony are doing. But it's always in fun and in the spirit of the parade to simply put a smile on people's faces. Our town's most infamous and controversial parade group is the Lake Bluff Precision Lawn Mowing Drill Team. Each year, they dress in costumes and push mowers in precision formations while spoofing a national or local topic. If you look closely, there's always a sign regarding Save the Children's Home when the group passes by. In 2010, a wild turkey had made its home at a busy intersection of our town, creating quite a stir. So the mowers, dressed as hunters, and the usual Save the Children's Home was altered to Feed the Children's Home. And on this historic 100th anniversary, Richard Moley, the boy who once walked down the streets of Lake Bluff carrying an American flag while the villagers threw money into it to support the orphanage, came back again to visit his hometown of Lake Bluff. Dick and his current wife Ronnie had a chance to tour his home where he lived with the Burkhills on 618 Maple Avenue after leaving the orphanage. They had a chance to meet the current residents, the Clarks, where Dick shared memories and stories and historical details about the home that the Clarks didn't know about. On this visit, members of the American Legion Post 510 unveiled a new change on the Village War Memorial. Ironically, for each war, the columns of names listed of men who served are completely even. All but one, the Korean War, where almost serendipitously a space remained to add Dick's name, which had been omitted. On the grandest of days, Dick, the general from Surprise, Arizona, stood in the same spot where one of the greatest generals of our time, Douglas MacArthur, once stood, and was honored to see his name on the Lake Bluff War Memorial. The American Legion was chosen by the 4th of July Parade Committee to be parade marshals for the 100th parade celebration. Along the parade route, the Legion's flatbed would come to a halt, and taps were played as they remembered and paid tribute to their fallen soldiers. Lake Bluff, the most patriotic town in America, asked Dick to serve as the Legion's honorary parade marshal. And as Dick's motorcade meandered its way through the village, you could almost hear the faint singing voices of children from long ago echoing in the trees as he passed the former site of the Lake Bluff Children's Home.
We welcome you, we welcome you, we welcome you.
But what I remember most about the children's home was a gathering that took place one day in the outfield of the giant softball field. There was a neighborhood kid who was flying a kite, who was a burnout, which is what we called kids back in those days who smoked. Still to this day, it was the highest kite I've ever seen flown. Now, what started out as one teenager flying a kite eventually became a small gathering as it continued to attract attention. Soon, the kite ran out of string, so we all reached in for any change in our pockets and then sent a girl up to buy more balls of string at White's Variety Store so it could go even higher. Best of all, the kid flying the kite gave some of us a thrill of a lifetime, a chance to hold the string. I was one of the fortunate ones to get a turn. As I took grip, the tension felt like there was a rhinoceros on the other end of the string. When the girl who went to White's arrived back with more string, we worked together as a group to attach the new string to the end of the existing string without letting the kite fly away from us. The kite gained more altitude and soared higher and higher into the heavens. It eventually morphed from a small triangle into a tiny white speck in the air. Were it not for the sun hitting the plastic kite, we would not have seen it at all. Someone wondered, what if a plane crashes into it? Which at first was a horrible thought. But as a young boy's mind works, that fear turned into great hope as we might actually make this happen. Eventually, the tension was too much for the kite to hold, and the string broke, sending the kite slowly descending back and forth to the waiting branches of a 150-year oak tree. While spinning on the merry-go-round and pondering new string strategies for our next all-time greatest kite-soaring record attempt, I remembered the simplest question coming across my mind. What is this place? And why do we call it the children's home? Because quite frankly, except for the 16 kids that lived in Tony's building, there were no children.
But the orphanage's darkest day occurred on Saturday, May 6, 1911. Shortly before 8 p.m., a fire swept throughout the Mary Marilla Hobbs building. Heroic efforts by the deaconesses with the help of neighbors brought 62 children to safety. Joining in the rescue, and one of the first on the scene, was Mrs. Kate Dyer, a widowed washerwoman who was making her way home when she noticed what appeared to be steam coming from one of the rooms on the third floor of the Hobbs building. Mrs. Dyer carried over a score of the children to safety. One child, Richard Miller, had apparently become scared in the commotion caused during the rescue effort and hid under his bed. He was discovered missing during roll call when his twin brother was mistaken for him. The child was carried out by Lake Forest fireman Charles Shinsky, but efforts to resuscitate failed. He died from smoke inhalation.
Kite to hold, and the string broke, sending the kite slowly descending back and forth to the waiting branches of a 150-year oak tree. While spinning on the merry-go-round and pondering new string strategies for our next all-time greatest kite-soaring record attempt, I remembered the simplest question coming across my mind. What is this place? And why do we call it the children's home? Because quite frankly, except for the 16 kids that lived in Tony's building, there were no children.
but the orphanage's darkest day occurred on Saturday, May 6, 1911. Shortly before 8 p.m., a fire swept throughout the Mary Marilla Hobbs building. Heroic efforts by the deaconesses with the help of neighbors brought 62 children to safety. Joining in the rescue, and one of the first on the scene, was Mrs. Kate Dyer, a widowed washerwoman who was making her way home when she noticed what appeared to be steam coming from one of the rooms on the 3rd floor of the Hobbs building. Mrs. Dyer carried over a score of the children to safety. One child, Richard Miller, had apparently become scared in the commotion caused during the rescue effort and hid under his bed. He was discovered missing during roll call when his twin brother was mistaken for him. The child was carried out by Lake Forest fireman Charles Shinsky, but efforts to resuscitate failed. He died from smoke inhalation.